get the googly, but not good with the sort of...
Not good with the baseball pitch? That was actually really odd, the way you shot that. Because it was like me looking down the lens, and then like doing it in like slow mo or something.
I remember exactly. We were doing something.
I felt stupid.
Or I had you do it a couple of different ways. What's in the movie I think we ended up doing? Yeah, there was, but there is, what he's saying is right. We did do some odd, doing some backwards. We did backwards. What was that one?
We did some very artsy shots in this movie.
I guess so, yeah. Trying some things.
There was one when I knocked out Shannon and I'm like pouring the alcohol all over him. But instead of him actually being there, the camera was on the floor, on like a swivel that could just go 360, and I'd just run around the camera pretending that was Shannon.
That's right.
Like pouring shit on it. Not shit, alcohol, fake alcohol. Running around screaming and stuff. And I was like, this is weird. It's good though.
Or even like shooting, where did you get any, like I know Cody had to, got that really good shot. And
my recollection of the gun stuff was, you know, we made that gun's a made up thing that we call the dually, you know, it's the rifle on top and the shotgun below. It was very front heavy, and I know it wasn't easy to do it for a long period of time. And flipping that stock, yeah, there was. They spent like an afternoon because you had to flip that stock close, and that wasn't easy. Mike and Cody were in that thing.
Yeah, I didn't do that. They trained me on the bike.
Yeah.
The bike, which was a death trap. with a back brake that didn't work. So that one scene where I ride out the house, I didn't have a back brake. And in the sand, trying to stop with just the front brake, I nearly went over the handlebars because I was going too fast. And then I found out...
Which is in the movie.
Yeah, and then I found out 2 takes later that there was no bolt holding on the rear axle. And I was like, well, this is clearly not safe to be riding around on. And Jake was like, just do one more, just do one more. It's fine, you've been riding around it all day. And I'm like, Jake, now I know it's not safe. It was not safe before without the brakes. Now this thing could just backfire at any moment, so I don't want to be on it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about bike mechanics.
Nick, could you talk a little bit about this character you're playing? Because it would be very easy to play him as a very dark sort of villainy character, and yet we still have to find ways to relate to him. And it's really not until sort of in Jake's script that he has that line about, you know, you guys took our land, that we could start to relate to him. So how difficult is it to create a character that we could sort of relate to from beginning to almost the end of this film?
I think, yeah, it's one of those things where reading the character, Jake, made it very easy for me to understand, where it wasn't all black and white. It was one of those things where he does terrible things, but at the same time, I think he really loves Elle's character, and he's been cheated by this world and is fighting against it. But he's a product of the environment in many ways, and although he does all these things which are debatable, there's also this drive in him to succeed and do well and take care of people. And so it's that thing of just
So like that.
no one's bad. He just does some bad things, but he also has goodness in him.
And I think I had a sort of very strong experience with having Nick come on to play that part, because I think in a lot of ways that character was sort of written in a more arch and evil way, and Nick's natural sort of intellect and humanity make him infinitely more interesting than probably the way he was even written. And it was written a very, very complex character, and those things are in there, but it's really, I think, the way that Nick sort of embodied him that makes him really feel that way. And you could feel it as we started going, as we started filming. It's like, this is going to feel much more complicated. It's going to be much more interesting with Nick doing it than just if it sort of played as written.
One of my favorite scenes is the scene with the baby. It's a very dark and evil thing, but then you think about it, it's like, well, he's doing it for sort of a good reason.
Desperate times, desperate measures.
Right. It's bad, but I'm reading here that you wanted the geography to be kind of, vague, but you shot in South Africa. Can you talk a little bit about like the setting and how you wanted that to feel?
I mean, the reason I wanted to be vague is I'm taking, there was an early version of the script that took place in the eastern plains of Colorado, so going into the Rocky Mountains, but you don't have these sort of water conflicts there in the same way. So I'm taking sort of like some of the political background stuff from the water conflicts between Arizona and California, but transplanting them to an area where you would have that kind of agriculture. There's not that agriculture in Arizona or California, so you have it in Colorado and Kansas. So, so I didn't want to set it in a place that we knew, because anybody from there who had been there would just know this is not what this is, how it would be or how it would work. And the movie itself, I see it as sort of an alternate reality, and so it felt like it could tolerate that sort of taking the artistic license of making it nowhere, but including sort of all of that stuff from all of those areas. It really comes from that. And then going to South Africa, it was a production consideration, a financial consideration, but I only really committed to it because they sent me a first batch of location photos, and it was perfect. It was exactly what was in my sort of mind's eye. I had driven cross-country alone many years ago, and I had seen that coming out of the Rocky Mountains into the eastern plains of Colorado, and it was always in my mind of sort of making it there, and where we shot in Africa has that feeling of this could have once been fertile. It doesn't just look like Death Valley or something where nothing has ever grown there. It feels like something had been there. And in fact, they do grow lots of things around where they can irrigate. It's very fertile land where they work.
Jake, there's an absolutely gorgeous shot in the movie where it's a time lapse of the vegetation growing once winter comes in. How did you shoot that? Because you have the time lapse of the vegetation growing, but at the same time the camera's moving. How long did that take? How did you just walk me through that?
It's amazing how quick you can do those shots now. The visual effects world has changed so much over the last few years. Before you used to always have to do that with a motion control rig and do several passes for it. And I wanted to do it stop motion. I mean, we were going to do it stop motion. And I found a stop motion artist in South Africa who was going to do it. He was going to literally, make those pieces and things. But I wanted it to have that sort of feeling to it, because again, it stays in the storybook style of our movie and everything else. And at a certain point, I sort of realized the guy wasn't capable of doing it the way I wanted it to be done in the time frame that we had. And our visual effects group said, I promise you that I can get this the way you wanted it. So we shot it practically. That wheat field, we didn't grow it, but we made it. We brought in parts of a wheat field from another area in South Africa and sort of planted those rows. And then we did a few passes of it just there, and they were able to make it look like the stop motion effect that I wanted. You can see like the pebbles sort of bounce around a little bit, and then it sort of just starts to grow in that way. So it's actually not as labor intensive as other effects stuff I've done, where you bring use motion control and all that stuff. We didn't have to do any of that. Now we're able to do it with my camera operator panning it. You don't have tracking marks all over everything anymore. It's amazing what we can do.
Yeah, I ended up rewinding and watching that scene 3 times.
Yeah, great.
It's so gorgeous.
Yeah, cool, great.
Did you want to try to create that sort of low-tech approach with things like your machines and so forth, so that they don't sort of scream out CG in the background and pull people out of it?
Very much so. I mean, in general, I still, I would say in the last year, I maybe like it with Gravity was the first one where I started to feel like I can't tell the foreground effects anymore. But those are mostly for objects, You still sort of. But that Planet of the Apes is the same thing. So you're watching and thinking they're not real. So there's something has happened in the last year. I don't know if it's the rendering software or those sorts of things that have changed this. But I always felt there was like a decade before that where I always felt so sensitive to foreground CGI characters and even objects. You could just tell, even if they were really good, you knew it was sort of fake. And I think that was still in my mind when I was planning the movie, because maybe the technology hadn't gotten there. But the thing that really drove it was I wanted the actors to be able to put their hands on the simulant or put something in its back. So the torso was a practical torso. We had these 2 parkour performers under it that would hike the mountains and everything. And then we digitally removed them and then animated the legs.
They had the worst job on set.
It was so tough.
Anytime I was a bit like, oh, it's hot out here, this is tough, I'd look over and see those guys doubled over, like carrying that thing around, and I was like, I'm doing alright. It could be a hell of a lot worse.
Touching a little bit more on the ambiguous nature of the genre, Nick, you have a really wide net of roles that you take on, from Skins and all the sci-fi movies that you're currently doing right now. Was that blending of kind of like a drama, western, sci-fi, one of the things that originally attracted you to the role, or?
Yeah, I like westerns, so I wanted to do western. And then this world that Jake created felt very real. Within that, even though it was sci-fi, futuristic, whatever, it still felt very grounded. and about the people in it. So that's what I liked about it. It's just but it was kind of a genre that I wanted to go into, and then it was just fun scenes, like specific scenes within it. I'd get excited about doing them. I would sit at home with a mate reading through that scene at the dinner table with like a big grin on my face, being like, and then we're going to shoot this, and this is the scene that I like the most, like with this and stuff, and then like, yeah, that's good.
And that one turned out very well.
Do you prefer to play villainous type characters, or like
Yeah.
you've seen? Yes. Like I don't know, Tony I think was villainous in a different sense of it. Like, do you like more of like
They're more interesting and fun, yeah.
Jake, could you talk a little bit about casting this film? Because I'm sort of assuming that, like, Michael maybe was the Boardwalk Empire connection possible.
Funnily enough, no. I started doing Boardwalk after we made the movie. Sort of a funny turn of events. And it started with, there were actually two other actors who were going to play Ernest, Michael's part, before that. And for whatever reasons, I was scheduling in the movie. We prepped the movie once in Spain, and it was stopped a few weeks before we were going to start, and everyone was casted. So at that point, we had Cody L, Nick, and then this other actor playing Ernest. And when it got reconstituted in Spain, we had a second actor who would replace the first actor, and then he also had a scheduling thing to happen. And Mike was somebody I sort of always had in my mind to do. I was like, it's so great if we could sort of get him to do it. And I caught him in this lucky window. There was a movie he was going to do that didn't have all the money together, and there was this window right before Boardwalk started, and they basically said, if you can get this completed by this date, I can come and do it. And it became this scramble to get it done. I mean, we prepped the movie in 4 weeks. I had been in South Africa alone with the producers and a very, very, very small group of people, maybe 5 or 6 people scouting, locations. I was there for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month with them. The financing hadn't all been sorted out, and then over the holiday it was, and then we went back and had 4 weeks to really prep a movie with a full crew. And then we started shooting.
What about all these crazy kids?
I offered them all the movie. I had seen them in everything else, and I mean, I sort of like that. I like getting sort of a feeling about actors. You've seen them be very good. I find the auditioning process to not be a terrific way to select actors. If you could create an environment that was like we have 45 minutes with them, and that initial sort of general nervousness that maybe they have and that I have about you getting past that. In some ways, it's like going off the movies you like and the people you like in them. I feel like is a better